Welcome to Hood Champion Boxing Sports. In boxing, find a way to win, find a way to lose. Welcome to the channel. If it's your first time, please subscribe. Yo, let's jump into it. Boom. Should Errol Spence just step aside and let Crawford pursue glory? That's the question. And I'm going to tell you from where that question derived. Oh, I had the privilege today to listen to some guys talk about goddamn boxing, and all they were saying, well, there were like 7 or 8 guys talking, and I was just there. About 6 of them were saying Errol Spence, he picked up that IBF belt and he never defended it. And I'm like, yo, these guys are so stupid. So he had the other guy trying to say, nah, he defended his belt against Porter. That's the only time, but he did defend it. And I sat there just shaking my head. Like, yo, these guys are clueless. You know what I'm saying? First of all, we know when he picked up that belt. All right? He went over there and he clipped Kelbrook. All right? Picked up the belt. But then he defended that belt against Mikey Garcia. And then he went on, and what did he do? He ended up fighting Sean Porter. Now, the whole thing with Mikey Garcia, look, I understand Mikey Garcia wanted to, challenge himself, looking for legacy, felt he could beat Errol Spence, got paid big money. Errol Spence knew he was fighting a smaller man, but it's like, hey, I'm going to show the world that I'm better than him, and I'm going to do it by outboxing him, not just coming in there and steamrolling him. Long story short, Errol Spence beat Mikey Garcia. He, for the most part, just beat him every round, and towards the end of the fight was really giving Mikey Garcia the business, so much so that Mikey Garcia's brother Robert was going to stop the fight. Anyway, Mikey gets to the 12th round. Errol Spence wins the fight. He defends his IBF belt. Now, this is the uniqueness of him going forward and defending that IBF belt against Porter. Now, a lot of people at this time, remember, they were saying, Errol Spence, you need to go. You need to fight Terrence Crawford. You know what I'm saying? But Errol Spence had already told the world and Crawford, look, I'm going to collect all the belts. Then I'm going to come and get that WBO off of you. A lot of people didn't agree with Errol Spence's approach, but that was his plan. He even went on record and said, look, Sean Porter probably be an easier fight than fighting you. So why wouldn't I go after him first? So anyway, the argument was that Errol Spence only defended his IBF title against Porter, and that's why I had to come and correct him. So they were like saying he didn't defend his IBF belt, then he only defended against Porter, when I had to go and correct him and sit there and say, look, first there was Brook, he picked it up, defended against Mikey Garcia, and then Porter. But the thing about Porter that's unique to me is, when I think about a champion defending his title, most of the time I see him going up against a guy who has no hardware, no title, no nothing. Just a guy who's grinded his way to the top, has become mandatory, now he gets a shot, right? That's how I envision that. But with Sean Porter, he already had a belt. So it was a unification. And yes, Errol Spence was defending his IBF belt. But to me, it's just a little bit different than fighting someone who didn't bring something to the table. And then Sean Porter, of course, had the WBC belt, and he was defending it against Errol Spence. But that's not how it was communicated to us. It's more like they're attempting to unify. It's a unification bout. There's no one saying, oh, and Porter's about to defend his WBC against Errol Spence, and Errol Spence is going to defend his IBF. No, it's like Porter and Errol Spence and the unification. So for me, I just have a hard time saying someone defended their belt. Even though that was the case for Spence and Porter, I just don't think it carries as much weight as someone who has nothing. Now, the other thing I want to point out is, in my opinion, when I was listening to them talk, man, it sounded to me like Errol Spence was just a little bit more hungry than Sean Porter. Now, I will say this. That's how I felt until they got in the ring. When they got in the ring, you could see that Porter was hungry. Porter was putting in that work. And the biggest difference in that fight, I think, was the knockdown. Spence dropped him. But nonetheless, Errol Spence picked up the WBC belt. So now he has a WBC, he has the IBF, right? People are still out there shouting, Errol Spence, go for Crawford, go for Crawford. You got all that other side of the street crap, everything. Errol Spence wasn't getting caught up in that too much. His whole thing was like, nope, I got to go after Pacquiao. Now, at this point in time, okay, you know, Crawford is out there fighting his mandatories. You see, the one thing about the WBO, hey, they'll let you go for a unification. But if that unification talk's not materializing, you have to defend your WBO strap against your mandatories. And, you know, you can't blame Terrence Crawford for his mandatories were, all right? Plus, you know the crap that was going on, Bob Arum, PBC. Anyway, let's get beyond that. Errol Spence, supposed to fight Pacquiao, has the injury. Pac-Man fights Ugas. Ugas picks up the WBA. Porter comes, ends up fighting Ugas. He beats him. Tough fight, but he beats him. Now he has all 3 titles, okay? And this is where people frustrate me. Because they're saying, once he picked up that WBA off of Ugas, they're saying, well, he waited all this time to defend his IBF strap. Now, and they feel it's unfair that Crawford has gotten stripped of his of his IBF strap. Now, to that I gotta say, I can understand a person who's just like, just look at the black and white. No gray, just black and white. Did Errol Spence defend that IBF belt a year after he beat he fought Porter? You know what? He ended up fighting Ugas. But was that an IBF defense? I mean, you know, if he's fighting Ugas, he's kind of defending the IBF. He's defending the WBC. Defending the WBC. So, I mean, kind of, but Ugas wasn't necessarily his IBF mandatory. Okay? But I get it, what they're saying. So then Boots Ennis comes into the mix now, right? Remember, Boots was over in the WBO for a while. Then all of a sudden, he ends up in the IBF. Some people like to say that Boots ducked Crawford. Now, I'm going to tell you this. Only the fly on the wall knows what really happens. But from what I understand, it seemed like the easiest way to get to a title was for Boots to go to IBF route. Okay? So he ends up in the IBF, becomes an interim. Now he's in line for Spence. And this is where people start getting frustrated because they're like, Spence should fight Boots. But the whole time, right? You got this negotiations and talks about Spence, Crawford, Spence, and Crawford. And that's where it gets kind of muddled up a little bit. Okay? And a lot of people point the finger at Terrence Crawford. And they're saying, you know what? And I'm going to say this. It's not just Boots that got put in a holding pattern because Spence and Crawford in the negotiation. It's not just Boots. You know, you had, what's his name over there? I think Rocha at the time, it ended up becoming the mandatory. He got put in a holding pattern. Boots was in a holding pattern. Stanley Eunice was in a holding pattern. You know, Keith Thurman was in a holding pattern. So it sucked for 4 people who were looking to fight, you know, either Crawford or fight Spence. It sucked. And you're talking about things dragging on. Months after months after months after months. Guys going inactive a year and stuff like that. It's crazy. Long story short, they end up finally making the fight. Crawford and Spence, right? We all know the story. Crawford leaving, top rank, doing things on his own. BLK Prime, a fantasy, and whatever. Him and Spence, negotiations, things didn't really work out. Crawford and Spence renegotiate. All of a sudden, deal gets made when these two talk. Now, this is the part that I don't really like. Crawford and Spence fight. Crawford wins, okay? He has all 4 belts. See, this is the part that I think is a little crazy. For people who want to say, well, it's wrong what they're doing to Crawford because Errol Spence went all this time without defending his IBF belt. You know, when you're negotiating, and you know what, you're right. The IBF belt didn't get defended. Guys were left in a holding pattern. Everyone who was a mandatory for all 4 belts were in a holding pattern, right? That's a fact. But if they're trying to make a fight, you better believe the sanctioning bodies are on board. So fans getting mad, don't get mad at Spence, don't get mad at Crawford, get mad at the sanctioning bodies for allowing that. We already know what time it is with the secret society. We know what time it is. All right? So I don't see how someone can blame Spence or blame Crawford. Now, I will tell you, I think Crawford ended up taking most of the blame because they felt like he wasted a lot of Errol Spence's time when they first started negotiating. I'm not going to say I agree or disagree with that. I'm just some of the feedback that I'm getting. And I'm like, you could kind of understand, but when you listen to Terrence Crawford's side, it's like, you could kind of understand him saying, look, I'm not going to sit here and wait. And I personally don't think that PBC, personally, I don't think they had any plans on Spence fighting Crawford because they didn't want Spence to fight Crawford anyway. I'm not making that up. That's a fact. They didn't want him to fight Crawford. He's the one that pushed for the fight. He was advised not to fight him. Okay? Now that's out of Spence's mouth. So you look at Crawford fights Spence and he beats him. And this is what is just crazy. Now Crawford gets shotgun blasted. He got to defend. I mean, how many people you want this man to fight? Got the rematch with Spence. You got Stanley Eunice. You got Barrios. You got Boots. You want him to fight all four people at the same time? Like, it's impossible. And this is where that secret society comes into play and the damn sanctioning bodies, man. They do some dirty stuff. So now you take a look at what's going on with that IBF and they, take the strap off of Terrence Crawford. Now, I'm going to say this. I don't think it was a good thing that Crawford basically said, look, I have no interest in fighting Jerome Boots in this. I'm not going to fight him. And I understand how some people take that as he's ducking him. I don't think he's ducking him because the same people who say Crawford's ducking Boots are the same people who say they think it's a tough fight for Crawford. They think he beats Boots. So he's not afraid of Boots. But is he choosing to do something other than fight Boots in this? Yes. But this is where it gets tricky. This is where I say Errol Spence, he should have just stepped aside. But we know Crawford doesn't want to fight Boots. He wants to fight Spence because, look at the money. But for me, it's like, Crawford, you got to stay active. Obviously Errol Spence is in a rush to get back in the ring. You look at some of the recent images that surface of him. Errol Spence looking about 375 pounds. You know what I mean? He back out there on the farm chilling. And he looking like he eating everybody cornbread. So, again, he didn't want to step aside. So Bud didn't want to fight Boots, but even if he wanted to, he couldn't because of the contract. And Earl not wanting to step aside. He activated his rematch clause, and now he's sitting on it. But we all know why. We've got PBC and trying to work out a deal, and we get it. There's a lot going on. It's just not that easy. But my thing is, if there was a way for Crawford to have, to be allowed to have a fight to stay active, because Spence is the one to. Crawford obviously wants to fight. Hey, that would have been cool if Crawford could have been like, you know what, I'll fight Boots and then pick up with Earl. But I'm gonna tell you this right now. I think Crawford beats Boots, but that's a high risk fight. That's no Vanessian. That's a high risk fight. So you can kind of understand what maybe even Crawford and his team say, hey, look, let's just hold out. Because we go fight this guy and make, I don't know, 7-8 million. He could blow everything up where now you don't get that chance to fight Spence where you're going to be looking to make, it's a guesstimation. Now don't hold me to this, maybe 20 to 30 million. You know what I'm saying? I can't see him making less than 20. So when you look at all of that right now, for me, it's just like, damn, if there was a way for Crawford to have an opportunity to go out there, if he wanted to, which I think if he said, yeah, I want to, I think they would have made that fight between Crawford and Boots. If Crawford would have been like, nope, Earl's not ready to win, whenever the hell Earl's going to be ready. Shit, let me get in here and fight Boots. And then he beats Boots. Boy, and if he gets in there and he just totally destroys Boots, I'll tell you that Crawford becomes more like a mythical figure, you know what I'm saying? It's like, you come like the damn Sasquatch, you know what I mean? Like Bigfoot, folklore, like people wouldn't even believe that a guy like that existed. But now we're in a position where people are pointing fingers. Oh, it's Errol Spence's fault. Oh, it's Crawford's fault. Oh, it's the sanctioning body's fault. Oh, it's Boots' fault. But I'm gonna tell you this: if Crawford would have lost to Errol Spence, the IBF had already promised Boots a guaranteed shot next. I think Errol Spence would have had to fight Boots, or I think Errol Spence would have gave up the belt too. I really do. Because I think we talk about Errol Spence struggling at 147. I think Crawford struggles to get down to 147 too. They say it's not easy. Seems to be harder for Spence, but for Crawford, it's not easy to get to 147. So I'm not surprised that Crawford seems to be okay with losing a strap. I wouldn't be surprised if Crawford drops the WBC and WBA, but holds on to that WBO. Okay? Because as far as his goals, and becoming 3-time undisputed and fighting, anybody to become 3-time, but we know Jamel and Canelo are the names. At least he gets one of them, but he's got to get through Tim Tszyu. So when it comes to Errol Spence, should he just step aside and let Crawford pursue his glory? Because the majority of fans feel that even at 154, Errol Spence is going to lose. But I'll say this, right? I'll say this. I think he loses. Errol Spence. I think Errol Spence loses. But I do think he'll perform better. And I'll tell you why I think that now. I liken it to a vehicle, right? Let's say you're going on a road trip. And your vehicle, you have a quarter tank of gas, right? That would be like Errol Spence getting down to 147. Sounds like he went in the ring, quarter tank of gas. And you got to drive 400 miles, but on that quarter tank of gas, you get 100 miles, right? And your friend's in the car, there's a full tank of gas. They go the whole 400, right? But then now, you guys get ready to go on another road trip, okay? Your friend, full tank of gas. Boom, he's out of there. You now have a full tank of gas in your vehicle, and you boom, right there with him. And I think that's what is going to be the case with Errol Spence. He had a quarter tank of gas, he went 100 miles. Full tank, now he can go 400 miles, which is the 400 miles of what Crawford was traveling. Do you understand what I'm saying? Now, I will tell you this. Terrence Crawford is the vehicle with a full tank of gas that can go 400 miles, right? But because of his skill set, he's not hitting potholes. He's avoiding wildlife. He's not have to worry about debris flying up and hitting his glass. He has that shit on cruise control. Full tank of glass, 400 miles, gets there within the estimated time. Now Errol Spence, full tank of gas. We got to travel 400 miles. But that car doesn't have a skill set to avoid them potholes in the road, to not hit that deer, to not run over that armadillo, to not have the IQ to avoid getting behind them trucks with, rocks and shit kicking up, shattering your glass. Okay? So although there's a full tank of gas in that vehicle, it probably only gets 100 miles in, maybe 200. And then they got to pull off the side of the road because it's so badly damaged and can't finish the road trip. Where the other vehicle, the Crawford vehicle, he's already there at the finish line. And that's what I liken Crawford and Spence, the rematch, to those two vehicles I just talked about. Both will be at full tanks of gas at 154, but only one has an IQ and intelligence with the driver behind that vehicle to avoid all the pitfalls and all those mistakes and error. The other one, I think he has an IQ good enough to get him 100 miles, 200 miles in, but to go the full distance, I just think at some point in time he's going to be a mash-up crasher. He's going to be off on the side of the road. So that being said, y'all leave your comments below. Let me know what you think. But I feel that no matter what direction things would have gone with Crawford and Spence and who won the fight, when it comes to that IBF strap, I think Jerome Boots Ennis would have been asked out either way. I don't think he would have got the Errol Spence fight if Spence beat Crawford. They still got the rematch. It's a contract. But even if somehow he was able to get out of that, I think Errol Spence would be like, nah. Because even in the rematch, he doesn't want to fight at 147. They both seem to want to fight at 154. So it doesn't matter who would have won. Jerome Boots Ennis would have just basically been what people call an email champ and paper champ. Because nobody wants to kill themselves and get down there. Jerome Boots Ennis is a young dude, man. He can still cut weight and get down to 147 easily. He says easily. So these other guys are struggling. So, I mean, to me, it doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure out that the direction things went with Jerome Boots Ennis, that's the direction it was going to go. And for those people saying, well, the IBF could have let Crawford hold the belt and they get through Errol Spence and then fight Jerome Boots Ennis after the rematch with Errol Spence. Let me tell you something. I think there would have been lawsuits and everything, because now the IBF sends a letter to Boots Ennis and says, hey, after you will get the winner. And now that's something they promised. They didn't say you will get the winner and after the rematch. That's not what they said. So now you got lawsuits and everything else, man, that could possibly come in their way. Because now you got this piece of paper that says something and they're not doing what they said. And things could get ugly. And you could already tell that Bosey and Boots were frustrated, and they were ready to go that direction to get either Spence or Crawford in the ring. But I'm gonna tell you this: if Spence would have fought Boots, I think Boots would have beat him. I think Boots would have beat him badly. But Boots against Crawford, I don't know. I think that's a close fight, though. I'm gonna be honest with you. Crawford throwing them wide shots. It could be bad because people say Boots can crack. Boots is tall and long too, and it just would be an interesting fight. That being said, man, y'all keep cool. Shout out to the veterans on 7 continents. Should Errol Spence just step aside and let Crawford pursue his glory? I kind of think so, but at the same time, I think part of Crawford's glory is going into that rematch with Errol Spence and proving that even with a full tank of gas, that should be able to go 400 miles on a road trip. At least when he's on the road with them, Spence ain't going no more than 100 miles. And it is what it is. That being said, y'all keep cool. I'm in the breeze.